No one told me to leave. There was no dramatic confrontation. No final argument. No moment where someone said something unforgivable and I walked out in anger. I just woke up one morning and realized I'd already left. Emotionally. Mentally. In every way that mattered. The physical distance was just catching up to a decision my body had already made. My name is Claire. I'm 41. And I spent most of my life thinking family was something you endured, not something you chose. The day I understood I could choose differently, everything shifted. Not overnight. Not in a single revelation. But gradually, like watching dawn break so slowly, you don't realize it's happening until suddenly there's light where darkness used to be. People always ask about the moment. The thing that happened. The final straw. There wasn't one. It was 1,000 small moments accumulated over decades. Each one tolerable on its own. Together, they became unbearable. My mother's dismissive comments when I tried to share something meaningful. My father's emotional absence, physically present but emotionally unreachable. My siblings' casual cruelty disguised as teasing, their laughter at my expense normalized as family humor. The holidays that left me feeling emptier than when I'd arrived, drained by the performance of happiness I couldn't actually feel. The phone calls that took more energy than they gave, leaving me exhausted and wondering why connection felt so much like depletion. The expectation that I'd keep showing up no matter how much it cost me, no matter how little I received in return. None of it was dramatic enough to justify leaving by conventional standards. But conventional standards were written by people who'd never felt what it's like to be slowly eroded by love that looks like love but feels like water torture. Constant. Wearing. Invisible to everyone but you. The shift started internally. Quietly. So quietly I almost didn't notice it happening. I stopped feeling guilty when I didn't call my mother back immediately. The first time it happened, I'd forgotten. Set my phone down after work and didn't pick it up for hours. When I saw her missed call, I felt the familiar spike of anxiety. But underneath it, something new. A whisper that said, "You're allowed to have your own time." I stopped feeling anxious before family gatherings. Used to spend days beforehand with my stomach in knots, mentally preparing for the dynamics, the comments, the emotional labor. Then 1 month before a birthday party, I realized I wasn't preparing. Wasn't bracing. Just planning to show up and leave when I wanted to. I stopped feeling disappointed when conversations stayed surface level. My father would ask about work, I'd give a real answer about a challenge I was facing, and he'd respond with generic advice before pivoting to something about himself. Used to hurt. Then it just became expected. Then it became nothing at all. These absences of feeling felt strange at first. Like something was wrong with me. Like I was becoming cold or unfeeling. Then I realized nothing was wrong. I was healing. The emotional attachments that had kept me tethered were loosening. Not because I was angry, but because I was tired. Tired of trying. Tired of hoping. Tired of showing up to relationships that didn't nourish me. Tired of being the only one who seemed to notice that something was missing. My therapist asked when I first considered leaving. I don't think I considered it, I said. I think I just started drifting and eventually noticed I'd drifted far enough to not go back. That sounds passive. It was passive. Until it became active. When did it become active? When I stopped calling it drifting and started calling it choosing. She nodded. Tell me about that shift. I thought about it. Drifting felt like something happening to me. Like I was losing connection without meaning to. Choosing felt like something I was doing. Intentionally. With purpose. And when did you start choosing? When I realized I could. The choosing happened gradually. A series of small decisions that built into something larger. I chose not to attend Thanksgiving one year. Made other plans with friends. Told my family casually, matter of fact. Braced for pushback. My mother called within an hour of my text. You're not coming to Thanksgiving? No. I have other plans. With who? Friends. Friends. She said it like the word was suspicious. Insufficient. You're choosing friends over family? I'm choosing peace over obligation. That's a hurtful thing to say. It's an honest thing to say. Well, I don't know what we're supposed to tell everyone. People will ask where you are. Tell them I had other plans. It's going to look like we had a fight. We didn't have a fight. Then why aren't you coming? Because I don't want to. The silence on the line was thick, heavy with everything she wanted to say but couldn't quite articulate. I just don't understand this new version of you, she said finally. I know. She hung up frustrated. I sat in my apartment, phone still in my hand, and felt nothing. No guilt. No anxiety. No urge to call her back and smooth things over. Just calm. That's when I knew something fundamental had changed. I chose not to engage in family drama. When my sister called complaining about our brother, the latest transgression, the way he never helped with mom and dad, the way he was selfish, I listened briefly and then said I had to go. You never want to talk anymore, she said. I want to talk. Just not about family dysfunction. But we're family. This affects you too. It doesn't, actually. I've removed myself from the dynamic. You can't just remove yourself from family. I can. I have. That's not how family works. Maybe not. But it's how I work now. She was quiet. Then, you've really changed. Yes. Not for the better. That's your opinion. She didn't call for 3 months after that conversation. I didn't reach out. Didn't feel the pull to fix things. Didn't compose apologetic texts in my head or rehearse what I'd say if we talked. Just let the distance settle like snow. Quiet. Accumulating. Natural. I chose not to explain myself. When my father asked why I was being distant, I said I was prioritizing my mental health. Your mental health? What does that have to do with family? Everything. I don't understand. I know. And I'm okay with that. He wanted me to elaborate. To justify. To make it make sense to him in language he could process and categorize and ultimately dismiss as unnecessary. I didn't. Because his understanding was no longer a requirement for my choices. Claire, you're talking in circles. Just tell me what the problem is. There's no problem. I'm just creating space for myself. Space from what? From dynamics that don't serve me. What does that even mean? I took a breath. Dad, I love you. But I don't enjoy most of our interactions. They leave me feeling drained and unseen. So I'm limiting them. Unseen? We talk all the time. We talk at each other. That's not the same thing. This is ridiculous. You're making problems where there aren't any. Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally acknowledging problems that have always been there. He made a frustrated sound. Your mother thinks you're going through something. Some kind of phase. I'm 41, Dad. I don't have phases. I have realizations. Well, this realization is hurting people. I'm sorry about that. But staying was hurting me. Each choice felt small. Individually, they seemed insignificant. Just one declined invitation. One shorter phone call. One boundary stated plainly. But together, they built something solid. A boundary. A barrier. A new life on the other side of family obligation. If you've ever stayed in relationships, family or otherwise, out of guilt rather than love, you'll understand what it feels like when the guilt finally dissolves. It's not dramatic. It's just quiet. Like setting down a heavy bag you've been carrying so long you forgot it wasn't part of your body. For years, guilt had been my primary motivator. Guilt about not calling enough. Not visiting enough. Not being the daughter they wanted. Not playing the role I'd been assigned. Guilt kept me showing up to gatherings that left me hollow. Kept me answering calls I didn't want to take. Kept me performing connection I didn't feel. And then one day, the guilt was just gone. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally cared more about myself than about their disappointment in me. 6 months into this new way of being, my mother asked me directly, "Are you leaving the family?" We were on the phone. What had once been weekly routine check-ins had become sporadic, sometimes going weeks without contact. I'm not leaving. I'm just not participating the way I used to. What does that mean? It means I'm choosing which parts of family life work for me and declining the rest. You can't pick and choose family. Why not? She didn't have an answer. Just sputtered for a moment, searching for the rule that would make me wrong, before pivoting to guilt. Your grandmother would be so disappointed. Grandma's dead, Mom. And using her memory to manipulate me isn't going to work anymore. I'm not manipulating. You are. And I'm done responding to it. Silence. Heavy, loaded silence where I could hear her breathing, recalibrating, trying to find the approach that would crack my resolve. I don't know who you are anymore, she said finally. I'm the same person I've always been. You just don't like this version because it doesn't accommodate you. That's cruel. It's honest. And I've learned that honesty feels cruel to people who benefited from my silence. I never asked you to be silent. You didn't have to ask. You just made it clear that my real feelings weren't welcome. So I learned to keep them to myself. Until I learned to keep myself to myself. This is what your therapist is telling you, isn't it? To blame everything on your family. My therapist is helping me understand patterns. What I do with that understanding is my choice. And you're choosing to abandon us. I'm choosing myself. If that feels like abandonment to you, maybe that says something about what my role in this family has always been. That conversation was the closest thing to a breaking point we had. But it wasn't dramatic. It was just clear. After that, communication slowed to nearly nothing. My mother would text occasionally. Short messages. Thinking of you. Hope you're well. Generic statements that required no real response. I'd reply briefly. Thanks. You too. Matching her energy exactly. My father called once a month, usually from the car on his way home from somewhere. We'd talk for 10 minutes about weather and work and nothing substantial. He seemed relieved when I had to go. My siblings stopped reaching out entirely. The group chat they'd created years ago continued without me. I'd left it months earlier, exiting quietly without announcement. No one added me back. No one asked why I'd left. They just adjusted, adapted, moved on. Which told me everything I needed to know. A year after I'd started choosing myself, I realized I'd effectively left my family. Not geographically. I still lived in the same city, 30 minutes from my parents' house, 20 from my sister. Saw them occasionally at necessary events, weddings, funerals, milestone birthdays. But emotionally, spiritually, I was gone. And the surprising thing was, I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them. The fantasy family I'd always hoped they'd become. The ones who'd suddenly understand me, see me, value me for who I actually was instead of who they needed me to be. But the actual people? The dynamics? The shallow conversations and emotional labor and constant low-grade disappointment? I didn't miss any of it. What I felt instead was relief. Space. Breath. Room to be myself without editing, without performing, without managing everyone else's emotional comfort at the expense of my own. My best friend asked if I felt guilty. We were having coffee. She'd known me through all of it. The years of trying. The slow withdrawal. The final letting go. Not anymore, I said. Not at all. Not even a little. I think I used up all my guilt reserves over the years. Spent decades feeling guilty about everything. Guilty for having needs. Guilty for being hurt. Guilty for wanting more than they could give. There's just none left. That's kind of amazing. It's kind of necessary. Guilt would have pulled me back. And going back would have destroyed me. She stirred her latte. Do they understand why you left? No. They think I'm going through something. A phase. A breakdown. Some kind of rebellion. Not that you're actually healthier now. That would require them to acknowledge that there was something unhealthy before. And that would require self-reflection they're not capable of. That must be frustrating. It was. Now it's just accepted. They're who they are. I can't make them see what they don't want to see. People have strong opinions about leaving family. They'll tell you blood is thicker than water, conveniently forgetting the full quote. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Bonds you choose are stronger than bonds you're born into. They'll tell you family is forever as if permanence equals value. As if sticking with something harmful is somehow more virtuous than walking away. They'll tell you you'll regret it. That one day you'll wish you'd tried harder. Given more chances. Been more patient. They say this from the safety of families that didn't damage them. Or from the denial of families that did, but they're not ready to acknowledge it. I used to listen to those opinions. Let them make me feel wrong for wanting distance. Let them convince me that my exhaustion was a character flaw, my boundaries were selfishness, my need for peace was weakness. Now I understand. People who've never needed to leave can't comprehend why anyone would. And their incomprehension isn't my problem. 18 months after choosing myself, I attended a cousin's wedding. The first family event I'd been to in over a year. I went alone. Arrived late enough to skip the ceremony, early enough for cocktail hour. Left before the dancing started. Spoke to people politely but briefly. Smiled for photos when asked. Ate dinner at a table with distant relatives who didn't know me well enough to comment on my absence from family life. It was fine. Tolerable. Manageable because I knew it was temporary and I could leave whenever I wanted. My mother cornered me near the bathroom during dessert. You barely said hello. I said hello. We hugged at the cocktail hour. You know what I mean. You're not engaging. You're just present. Physically. But you're not really here. That's all I can offer right now. Right now? So this is temporary. I don't know. Maybe it's permanent. Maybe this is just who we are to each other now. I hate this. I know. But it's better than what it was. How is this better? You're barely speaking to anyone. You're leaving early. You're treating this like an obligation instead of a celebration. Because that's what it is for me, Mom. An obligation. I came because I care about my cousin. But I'm not pretending to enjoy family dynamics that have never felt good to me. You used to enjoy family events. No. I used to perform enjoyment. There's a difference. She looked at me like I was a stranger. I don't recognize you. Good. The version of me you recognized was killing me. Her face crumpled slightly. Not quite tears. Just hurt. You're being deliberately cruel. I'm being honest. And honesty feels cruel when you've only ever received performance. I want my daughter back. She's right here. You just never knew her. You only knew the version of her that accommodated you. That was the last substantial conversation we had. After that, we settled into polite distance. Birthday texts. Holiday cards. Occasional brief phone calls where we talked about nothing important and both pretended it was enough. The relationship exists. But it's hollow. Surface level. Protected by layers of civility that keep us from ever touching anything real. And I'm okay with that. Because hollow and distant is better than close and damaging. Building a life outside my family took time. I had to learn who I was without the roles I'd played for decades. Without being the mediator who smoothed over conflict. The helper who anticipated needs. The one who tried to hold everything together even as it fell apart in my hands. I had to learn what I actually liked. What brought me joy instead of just relief that something wasn't painful. What I wanted instead of what was expected. Who I was when I wasn't performing for family approval. The discovery process was harder than I expected. 40 years of accommodating others leaves you with a hazy sense of self. You know what you're supposed to like. What would make you acceptable? What would earn approval? But what you actually like. That takes excavation. I tried things. New hobbies. Different social groups. Ways of spending time that no one in my family would understand or value. I built friendships that felt nourishing instead of draining. Found chosen family who showed up consistently, who asked real questions and listened to real answers, who made space for all of me instead of just the convenient parts. Created traditions that brought joy instead of obligation. Friend giving that felt warm instead of tense. Holiday gatherings where no one kept score of who brought what or who helped clean up. Relationships where presence was enough. Where I didn't have to earn my place through service or performance or managing everyone else's emotions. I celebrated holidays with people who wanted me there. Not because we shared DNA, but because we genuinely enjoyed each other. I built a life that felt like mine. Not a life adjacent to family. Not a life in service of family expectations. Not a life performing connection I didn't feel. Just mine. My therapist asked what I'd say to my younger self. We were in session, 2 years into my new life. Processing what it meant to have successfully created distance. I'd tell her she doesn't owe anyone her presence. That walking away isn't failure. That choosing yourself isn't selfish. What do you think younger you would say? She'd probably be scared. She'd think she can't survive without them. That she needs family to be whole. That being alone is worse than being unseen. And now? Now I know family doesn't complete you. It's just one relationship category among many. And if it damages you, you're allowed to step away. Being alone is only lonely when you're trying to fill a space that was never actually filled to begin with. You don't sound lonely now. I'm not. I have people. Real people. Chosen people. People who see me and still want to be around me. That's worth more than a dozen family members who love the idea of me but not the reality. 2 years after choosing myself, my sister reached out. The text came unexpectedly. Can we meet for coffee? No preamble. No casual check-in. Just a request. I agreed, curious more than anything. We met at a cafe halfway between our apartments. First time we'd spoken in over a year. She looked tired. Older than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just stopped looking closely enough to notice. Mom says you've abandoned us, she said after we'd ordered. I haven't abandoned anyone. I've just stopped participating in dysfunction. Is that what you call it? Yes. What do you call it? She stirred sugar into her coffee slowly, not meeting my eyes. I call it family. Then maybe we have different definitions. Apparently. We sat in silence for a moment. The cafe buzzed around us. Other people's conversations. Normal relationships. Easy connections. Do you miss us? She asked finally. Sometimes. But not enough to go back. Back to what? To being the person who absorbed everyone's emotional chaos. Who tried to fix things that weren't mine to fix. Who sacrificed herself to keep everyone comfortable. No one asked you to do that. You're right. I volunteered. And now I've resigned. So that's it? You're just done. I'm done with the old way. If someone wants a different relationship with me, a healthier one, I'm open. But I'm not going back to what it was. She nodded slowly, processing. I don't think anyone knows how to have a different relationship with you. I know. And I've made peace with that. Have you really? Made peace? Yes. Because to me it looks like you've just given up. Maybe giving up and making peace look the same from the outside. But they feel different. Giving up is bitter. This is just clear. Clear about what? About who people are. About what they can give. About what I need. About the fact that those things don't align and never will. My sister looked down at her coffee. I think I understand why you left. I don't think I would have done it. But I understand. It was the closest thing to acknowledgement I'd received from anyone in my family. Thank you for saying that. I wish it could be different, she said. So do I. But wishing doesn't change anything. That coffee meeting was the last time I tried to explain myself. After that, I stopped justifying my choices to anyone. People either understood or they didn't. Either way, my decision stood. I'd learned that explaining yourself to people who are determined not to understand is exhausting. They'll ask questions that sound like curiosity, but are actually challenges. They'll demand justification that they'll dismiss no matter how articulate. They don't actually want to understand. They want you to admit you're wrong so they can stop being uncomfortable. And I'd stopped prioritizing their comfort over my peace. Choosing yourself sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things you can do. It requires disappointing people you love, accepting that they may never understand, living with the discomfort of being misunderstood and mischaracterized. It requires building a new identity outside of family roles, finding worth that isn't tied to what you provide to others, learning to value yourself based on who you are instead of what you do. It requires sitting with the grief of knowing your family of origin will never be what you needed them to be, that the unconditional love you expected doesn't actually exist. That belonging has conditions you can no longer meet. But it also brings something profound, peace. The peace of not pretending, not performing, not contorting yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for your wholeness. The peace of choosing relationships that choose you back, of investing energy in connections that reciprocate, of building a life that doesn't require you to be smaller, quieter, or less than you are. The peace of waking up and not dreading phone calls. Not bracing for criticism. Not managing other people's emotions before your own. The peace of being seen. Really seen. By people who care enough to look. 3 years after choosing myself, I sat in my apartment on a Sunday morning. Coffee in hand. Sun streaming through the windows. No family obligations on the calendar. No guilt about missing them. No dread about upcoming events. Just peace. My phone buzzed. A text from a friend. Brunch later? Found a new place. I smiled and replied yes. This was my family now. People who invited instead of obligated. Who asked instead of assumed. Who respected boundaries instead of testing them. Who showed up because they wanted to, not because they had to. People who knew me. Who valued me for who I actually was instead of who they needed me to be. This was the life I'd built on the other side of leaving. And it was better than anything I'd left behind. I want to be clear about something. Leaving family isn't always the answer. Some families can change. Some relationships can heal. Some people are capable of growth and understanding and genuine transformation. But some aren't. And knowing the difference, really knowing it, deep in your bones where certainty lives, is what allows you to make the right choice for yourself. I knew my family wasn't going to change. Not in the ways I needed. Not in the timeline that mattered. Not with the depth required for real connection. I'd given them decades to see me. They'd chosen not to. I'd given them countless chances to do better. They'd chosen comfort over growth. I'd shown them who I was over and over. They'd chosen the version they preferred instead. So I stopped waiting for them to become people they weren't capable of becoming. I stopped hoping for depth where only surface existed. I stopped sacrificing myself on the altar of family obligation. And I chose myself instead. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you start loving yourself more. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they're not your people. It doesn't mean you're giving up on family. It means you're giving up on the fantasy of who they might become and accepting the reality of who they are. And accepting reality, even when it's disappointing, is always better than clinging to fantasy. Sometimes people ask if I regret it. If I ever wish I'd tried harder. Stayed longer. Given more chances. Been more patient. More forgiving. More accommodating. I don't. Because I gave decades. I gave everything I had to give and more. I tried every approach I could think of. I bent until I broke. I sacrificed until I had nothing left to sacrifice. And none of it changed the fundamental reality. They were who they were. And who they were wasn't compatible with who I needed to become. Staying would have required me to remain small. To suppress my needs. To accept being unseen. To keep performing a version of myself that fit their comfort. Leaving allowed me to grow. To take up space. To prioritize my well-being. To build a life where I'm not just tolerated but celebrated. Where I'm not just accommodated but truly wanted. The choice, when framed that way, was clear. Even when it was hard. My therapist asked recently what I'd gained by leaving. Everything, I said without hesitation. Peace. Clarity. Self-respect. Relationships that nourish me. A sense of my own worth that isn't tied to what I provide. A life that feels like mine. And what did you lose? The fantasy. The hope that they'd change. The belief that family was supposed to be everything. The expectation that blood relation meant deep connection. Do you grieve those losses? Sometimes. Late at night, occasionally. When I see other families who seem close and wonder what that would have felt like. But they were illusions. And I don't miss illusions as much as I feared I would. Why not? Because reality, even disappointing reality, is solid ground. You can build on it. Fantasy is quicksand. Looks stable but swallows you whole. The truth is, leaving family, even when necessary, comes with complicated feelings. There's relief mixed with sadness. Freedom mixed with loss. Peace mixed with occasional loneliness. There are moments when I see a mother and daughter laughing together in a cafe and feel a pang. Not for my mother specifically, but for the relationship I never had. The one that might have been if circumstances were different. There are holidays when I'm with chosen family and still feel the ghost of biological family. Wonder what they're doing. If they miss me. If they've changed. They haven't. I know this. But sometimes the wondering persists anyway. But complicated doesn't mean wrong. It just means real. And I'd rather live in complicated reality than comfortable fantasy. I'd rather feel occasional sadness about a choice that saved me than constant pain from a situation that was destroying me. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself, if you've been considering leaving but feel guilty or scared or unsure, I want you to know something. You don't need permission. Not from them. Not from anyone. Not even from yourself, really. You just need to acknowledge what you already know. You don't need a dramatic final straw. A clear villain. A story that makes sense to outsiders. A justification that would hold up in court. You just need to know, in your bones, that staying costs more than leaving. And when you know that, really know it, in the place where truth lives, the choice becomes clear. It won't be easy. Leaving never is, even when it's necessary. But it will be right. And right, even when hard, is better than easy but soul-destroying. No one pushed me out of my family. I chose to leave. Quietly. Gradually. With intention and clarity and a deep understanding of what I was doing and why. Not in anger. Not in bitterness. Not in revenge. Not to punish anyone or prove a point. In self-preservation. In self-love. In recognition that I deserved better than what I was receiving. In clarity about who they were and who I was, and the fundamental incompatibility of those two things. In acceptance that loving them didn't mean I had to destroy myself for them. I left without yelling. Without drama. Without burning bridges or sending manifestos or making sure everyone knew exactly why. I just walked away from a table where I was never truly welcomed and built my own table instead. One where everyone has a seat by choice, not obligation. Where vulnerability is met with care instead of dismissal. Where presence is honored, not just assumed. Where people show up because they want to be there, not because they'll feel guilty if they don't. That table is my family now. And choosing it, choosing myself, choosing peace, choosing reality over fantasy, was the bravest and best thing I've ever done. If stories like this feel familiar, you're not alone. There are more stories like mine here. About the quiet courage of choosing yourself when everyone tells you not to. About building family from chosen connections that honor who you actually are. About understanding that leaving isn't giving up, it's waking up to what you deserve. You don't owe anyone your suffering. Not even family. Especially not family who never noticed how much their love was costing you. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is save yourself. And that's not selfish. That's survival. And survival, when you've been slowly drowning in relationships that look like love but feel like water torture, is the most radical act of self-love there is. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to build a life that doesn't include people who damage you, even if those people raised you. Blood doesn't obligate you to burn yourself for their warmth. And the day you understand that, really understand it, is the day you become free.